Welcome to Discovery Watch with John Kaiser.
I'm Jim Goddard. John, you just returned from the American Mining and Exploration Association conference in Reno, Nevada. Any themes catch your attention?
The AEMA is a very technical conference. There are very few investors at all. It is mainly the service providers, drilling contractors, geologists attend it, and there's a handful of companies who exhibit in the Core Shack area, and it's a very interesting conference. It's used to be called the Northwest Prospectors Association Conference. It used to be held in Spokane, but in the last couple of years it's been in Reno, and I guess it's much easier to get there. Now, I was at this conference because I gave a presentation on trends in exploration financing, in which I addressed the difference between discovery exploration funding and feasibility demonstration funding. And I've crunched the numbers going back to 2002, and TSX Venture Juniors, which have, or at least ones that started on the venture exchange, while they were there and involved in the resource sector, they managed to raise about $33 billion versus about $15 billion that was raised by companies that never quite made their project to a economic study stage, such as a PEA or higher. And we're now in a kind of a transition phase where there's a shift away from feasibility demonstration towards discovery exploration. And one of the sort of themes that's emerging in Nevada is the difference between Nevada 1.0 and Nevada 2.0. Now, Nevada is America's biggest metals producer by value, way up there. 90% of all production value in the United States comes from Nevada, and most of that comes from gold. Nevada itself peaked at 10 million ounces or so a year about 6-7 years ago, and is now flatlining in the 5 to 6 million ounce range. And the question is, where are the additional ounces going to come from? Is there room? So there's been a boom of companies going back into Nevada in the past couple of years after the big washout that started in 2011. The Nevada 1.0 type of companies are getting hold of known systems, and they're either treating them as optionality type plays where, you've got your 0.3 to 0.6 gram per ton deposit that isn't really going to work at $1,300 gold. But if we get $1,600 to $2,000 gold, these deposits become quite interesting. But the other Nevada 1.0, there's an interest in high-grade potential, going after deeper zones where there's perhaps a bonanza high-grade that sits underneath lower-grade oxide resources at surface. And these systems tend to be on the edges or within the ranges of exposed outcrop where prospectors in the past have crawled all over it and found stuff and maybe drilled some holes and never quite put together a proper deposit. But there's a rethinking going on as to, well, did we really drill this from the right angles? Did we understand the stratigraphy properly? And, a classic example of that is Andy Wallace, who was part of the Cordex syndicate with John Livermore, and they were legendary 30, 40 years ago when they discovered all these prospects, a fair number of them which became mines. He's been working with Columbus Gold for the past 5-6 years, and they have a entity called Allegiant, into which they've put all their Nevada assets. Their flagship is the East Side deposit, which has 1 million plus ounces of 0.63 gram per ton. That, in my view, is relatively low, but they also have 10 other projects, one of which is the Bolo, for which they did a program earlier this year, and they're just submitting the assays. These are all part of Andy Wallace's legacy. One might call them Nevada 1.0 type stories. And Allegiant just raised about $7-8 million and will be spun out of Columbus Gold, which has been trending up lately because there's an expectation that Nord will buy out the company to acquire the minority stake in the Montanora gold deposit in French Guiana. So that's an example of a company that's going to, did the day when it's spun out is going to be set sometimes in December. They will be well financed. They're going to go in there. They're going to hit all these projects hard. That's an example of Nevada 1.0. Others are examples of 1.0 are Mike Power's Silver Range exploration, which has picked up a dozen deposits or projects in Nevada, based largely on going through the archives, the paper archives, and looking up at the rock collection that Nevada has maintained, the Bureau of Mines has maintained, and checking out all these reports of high grades and finding a remarkable number of these prospects not owned by somebody, checking out the geology, picking them up, and these again, Nevada 1.0, exposed at surface, insufficiently drilled, prospect generated, hope to farm out what will be a wave of new interest from other juniors in exploring in Nevada. Now, Nevada 2.0 is looking under the cover, and there's basically three cover types in Nevada that obscure gold deposits. One are the gravels that cover the downdropped basins between the ranges. Another is the upper plate rocks, which are not great hosts, but do exhibit leakage and sometimes have structurally controlled deposits such as Lone Tree. And then the third cover is much younger volcanics, about 15 million years ago, related to the Northern Nevada Rift, and so which have flooded over everything and obscured what might be there. And in the sort of northern part of Nevada, where you have these Carlin-type deposits, that is where most of the gold has been found and mined. And just as a brief history, way back 150 to 250 million years ago, you had siltstones being formed in the continental shelf and limestone carbonates formed closer to the shoreline. And then a thrust event, they call it the Roberts Mountain thrust, which pushed the siltstone on top of the limestones. They're basically the same age, but the siltstones sit on top. And between 40 and 25 million years ago, there was a dramatic event where a subduction slab had stalled as the whole San Andreas fault thing stopped pushing it and started heading north. And this sat there and dehydrated for 20, 30 million years, pooled an awful lot of metals in brines beneath the crust. And then at about 40 million years ago, the slab started to founder, and you had a wave of magmatism that did not produce a huge number of intrusions, but mobilized these fluids to come up the structures and find these siltstone caps on the limestones and create these fabulous Carlin-type deposits, which have yielded 250, 300 million ounces. There's at least another 100 million ounces there. And given the complex nature of Nevada, there's got to be another 600 million ounces left to be found in this part of Nevada. And Nevada 2.0 is all about coming up with ways of seeing through this mess on top that's hiding these deposits that were emplaced before all this basin dropping, basin range formation, and the volcanics flooding into it obscured an awful lot. One example is Newmont, which has developed something called deep sensing geochemistry factor, and it's a big secret as to what it's all involved. It involves some sort of surface geochemistry that's different from just grabbing soil samples, probably things like enzyme leaching, mobile metal ion, and that. And they're doing this to see through the upper plate rocks in the Leeville area of the Carlin Trend, where they are systematically trying to build up more ounces within that trend. And another one that has been a favorite of mine and which we have featured as a Discovery Watch candidate is Nevada Exploration, which has for 15 years been applying hydrogeochemistry to the waters that circulate through the basins, the gravels that sit on top of prospective rocks. And they were also present in the core shack. Of course, no core. They have yet to intersect anything that's a significant mineralization. But during the past year, they did a lot of work in the Kelly Creek Basin with their new Scorpion technology, which also is able to dig into the bedrock and get a bedrock sample along with a 3D water sample. They've just about got all the results in and hope to put out a news release and set the stage for a drill program through the gravels in an area that's sort of northeast of the Marigold and east of the Lone Tree system, all upper plate hosted systems, mineralized Nevada mines, and that's an example of Nevada 2.0, where you're using almost a remote sensing type technology to vector in on what could be a substantial new gold discovery.
We'll have more Discovery Watch with John Kaiser right after this.
Lotus Ventures Inc. is a BC-based medical marijuana company poised to launch into the rapidly evolving cannabis sector. Lotus is in the final review stage of the Health Canada approvals to become a licensed producer, having arranged facility financing of up to $12 million, plus building permits for its prototype indoor production facility. Shares trade under the symbol J on the Canadian Securities Exchange. Visit our website at lotusventures.ca.
I'm Greg Johnston, CEO of Carl Data Solutions, an industrial Internet of Things company that provides big data solutions for monitoring critical infrastructure. Carl Data offers machine learning and predictive analytics features through our cloud-based applications to deliver key asset-saving operational insights from massive amounts of data. Carl Data trades on the CSE symbol CRL and the pink symbol CDTAF. For more details on Carl Data, please visit carlsolutions.com.
Welcome back. John, Carlin Gold reported final results for its Cortez Summit project a couple of weeks ago, and the stock dropped into the low pennies. Are we done with Carlin Gold as a Discovery Watch candidate?
Well, I talked to Bob Thomas and Wayne Livingston of Carlin Gold. They had their core shack there, and they were pretty glum about this second part of the news release. Barrick spent $1 million drilling a 5,000-foot hole. They started in July. They gave a partial update in October, late October, where they described the upper portion of the hole, and the part that contained the lower plate portion they did not really say anything about. There, in the upper part, there was an arsenic-enriched segment in the upper plate rocks, but when the final results came in, the lower plate had no gold in it of any interest, and this was in a sense consistent with the alteration dropping to a more weakly altered state in the lower plate rocks. And of course, what you're really looking for is the upper plate rocks to serve as a cap. And when the fluids come up through the lower plate rocks and hit the upper plate cap rocks, they're going to flood through sideways and alter the limestones, carbonaceous rock, much more effectively than the tighter upper plate rocks. So this was very, very disappointing. This is an example of Nevada 2.0 because the Cortez Summit project is basically covered by volcanics from the northern Nevada rift structure, the event that took place around 15 million years ago. But Barrick's interest in this $1 million hole has to do with developments at the northern end of the Gold Rush deposit, which is sort of a 12 to 14 gram per ton system. It's refractory. They are going to underground mine it. They're going to drive a several kilometer long adit from the Cortez Hills mine area into Gold Rush. And they have discovered that to the north, stretching 3 to 4 kilometers to the northern limit of the Gold Rush breccia, breccia-style system, they are encountering very high-grade mineralization, what they liken to the deep star and deep post mineralization on their Gold Strike project in the Carlin Trend. And this area they call the 4 Mile area. It's very interesting because it starts approaching the Mill Canyon stock, which is an intrusion that's much older than the Carlin type mineralization, which in this area is about 35 million years ago. The intrusion is more 100 to 150 million years old. It did not bring any gold into the system, but what it did was it domed the package of upper plate and lower plate rocks, and also because of its own heat, created a very brittle environment around its edges. And this is what is the same situation with the Gold Strike stock in the Carlin Trend. Itself also not a source of any gold mineralization, but the structural preparation that it did enabled the Carlin type fluid flow to develop very high grade gold mineralization, 1 to 2 ounce type of mineralization. And Barrick has 4 drill rigs going there, drilling 800 to 1,000 meter holes, just a couple kilometers west of where they drilled this very deep hole. They're trying to figure out the orientation of the structure, and the Carlin Gold team has 2 ways of explaining why the upper part is altered and enriched in arsenic. There's either a structure that dips towards the west where Barrick is busy, in which case most of the juice is going to be on Barrick's ground, or it's a structure that dips to the east, which means a lot of potential will be on their own ground. Barrick is earning 70% by spending $5 million, and they need to spend another $4 million over the next 3 years. So they don't think that Barrick will go away quite yet. It'll be very interesting in February when Barrick does its annual review of everything that it has accomplished. They've already hinted they're quite pleased with what's happening in the 4 Mile area. So I don't think the story's over for Carlin Gold, but from a Discovery Watch potential, we need to wait for Barrick to say that we're going to drill some more of these expensive deep holes next year rather than wait a couple years.
New Legacy Gold has a high-profile project east of Barrick's Gold Rush and southeast of Carlin Gold's Cortez Summit. Where does the Iceberg project stand today?
There was a lot of hope at the beginning of the year for New Legacy's Iceberg project. They had intersected on the avocado target a pretty good interval of sort of 0.5 gram per ton smoke in all the right Carlin type of settings, and this was underneath the gravels in the basin. And they had done a core hole, and the core hole when we finally got the assays in January, it was not quite as good as what the RC hole had indicated. They drilled a couple more holes, and those were not very promising. And the whole stock, the story lost momentum. They had drilled a couple holes through the Iceberg system, targeting some deep IP anomalies that turned out to be just iron sulfides related to something else that came in there and wasn't a enriched deeper portion or over from the feeder zones to the Iceberg. But they did make a discovery, Serena, to the northwest of Iceberg. And in the current program that they're just wrapping up, it's a 16-hole program. They've got 2 holes underway with a 3rd planned. Part of that program is filling in between the Serena system and the North Iceberg system to see if there is more shallow oxide gold mineralization. They have commissioned Mine Development Associates, the Reno-based resource estimation company, to do a resource estimate. So they are creating an excuse for institutional shareholders to stay in the game by coming up with some sort of resource. I suspect the grade will be too low to get anybody excited about developing this process, but the institutions do like to see an optionality trade. in that if gold does go to $1,600, $2,000, all of a sudden something that's 0.6 to 0.8 gram per ton can be put into production. We'll have to see what they come up with later in the year as a resource estimate. But they also have 2 holes into the avocado area. It is the part of the project which Barrick, which is a large shareholder of New Legacy, continues to be very intrigued by, because this is what would be the sort of gold rush style of Cortez Hills style of mineralization. And one of those holes they don't seem to be very excited about, but the other one, they commented at the show, we see a lot more brecciation in this hole than we did in the one that got us excited in the first place. So hopefully we get some joy out of that. And then they've got one additional new thing, field work west of the fault that controls the northern Nevada Rift in rocks, what they call the VO area. They picked up gold-silver values in the geochem sampling. They think that this is evidence of a younger epithermal system at work over there. So they've got some holes into that target to see if they have, one of these younger gold-silver type systems. And the one other thing they're going to pursue next year is they believe through geophysical work, that there is evidence of a structure parallel to the iceberg structure, which they could tackle and perhaps generate new ounces. They'll have $9 million left in the treasury by the end of the year, and after a sort of fairly lackluster year, hopefully this final round of drilling will produce results in mid to late January that get everybody excited about New Legacy once again.
NV Gold last reported about its Across the Valley ATV project in late October. What's the status of that project today?
Now, this is also a Nevada 2.0 style of exploration program. Across the valley, of course, means across the Kelly Creek Basin valley, where the Twin Creeks deposit, 20 million ounces, still in production, is going on. And what they did earlier in the year was manage to get this checkerboard land, a deal with the ranchers who have never let anybody in the past 20, 30 years drill in this area. They did some blega sampling up in the hills and into the valley that gave them reason to believe there's a system present somewhere here under the gravels. They launched an RC program, and of course the gravity targets would suggest the basement's going to be shallow, is always off by somewhat, so it ended up being a little deeper than they expected. But they paused at 13 holes from the RC and switched to a core hole. And right now they have a core hole underway, and they don't know whether they're going to make this one deep hole to get into the lower plate and get a good picture of what is going on in the third dimension, or stop it and drill a second one. They will probably have a release soon on the RC hole results. I don't expect anything special. In Nevada 2.0 exploration, much of the early expenditure is just gathering information about the target and the third dimension. But hopefully we see the sort of smoke that we saw in the avocado drilling last year to get us excited about, okay, let's mount a serious program here now that we have a better understanding of how the geophysics all relates to the actual geology, and go in there and set a target into the scope and deliver a discovery next year.
John, Adamira Minerals was present at the American Mining and Exploration Conference in Reno, and so was the Forest Service. Did sparks fly between the two and start a fire?
Oh, it's certainly a setting for sparks to fly, because the Nugget Casino where the conference was held is actually in Sparks, which is the eastern extension of Reno, kind of like Burnaby is east of Vancouver, though all of it could be considered Vancouver. I spent some time with Mark Kalibaba at his little core shack table, and where he explained to me what the SE1 target was all about. Now, it turns out this is just a 300-meter-long conductor, but it is at the southern end of their Cook Mountain project in northeast Washington. And the whole project got a new sort of lease on life last year when they did a big geophysical survey over the whole region and studied how the former mines in that area that are now depleted and shut down lit up, and then looked for other examples of similar types of anomalies that nobody had ever tested. And this in this part, there's no evidence of past exploration. They have done geochem on the surface, and they have a gold, arsenic, and copper anomaly that lines up nicely with the geophysical anomaly. And they have been trying to get this permitted since the start of the year. This is Forest Service jurisdiction, and it has been an incredibly frustrating year for the company. They did manage to get a drill permit for the Big Banana target, which was a very long linear geophysical anomaly, but that turned out to be graphite, although graphite had not really been reported in this region, but the graphite was associated with what is a thrust fault, which is where graphite does develop. So the Big Banana turned into a dead banana, and they've been doing drilling in the oversight area and getting, good sniffs here and there. But they really wanted to go in there and drill this SE01 target. But the Forest Service coordinator has effectively jerked the company around by coming up with one new requirement after another. And then in August, she volunteered to go to Idaho to help fight the forest fires, where she was doing stuff that wasn't even related to her skill set, which was to interface with companies trying to get exploration permits and coordinate it with all the other bureaucrats within the Forest Service to make sure everything is done properly. And so for 2 months, she disappeared to fight these fires, which could have been easily done by somebody else. So Mark had just got another email from her. She's back in action, and now she's decided that a botanical study is needed to, proceed with granting a permit for this target. And so when I visited Mark on Thursday morning, he literally had flames shooting out of his ear. And I mentioned to him, do you know that the Forest Service has a very big booth at the far end of the conference hall? And he grabbed me and said, take me there. So we marched down there, and fortunately, there were some Forest Service people who are geologists and actually sympathetic to Mark's plight. And they immediately could see the sparks flying from Mark. So they grabbed him, they went away and did some firefighting to put out the fire. And hopefully something will come that unjam this, what appears to be obstructionism in getting permits done. And I stuck around and chatted with the other person manning the booth and did my own little venting, complaining about if the Forest Service continues to obstruct giving permits for exploration. Right now, with the political mood in the United States, you're going to see the pendulum swing far more back in the other direction than is really good for anybody. So it would be wise of the Forest Service to start thinking in productive terms. And that, of course, next leads to the conversation about the sage grouse, which, again, that's a BLM issue. It's a big problem in northern Nevada. The anti-mining lobby in the United States has taken up the sage grouse cause as a way to sterilize huge regions for mining exploration and development. And the irony is that mining and exploration really does not disturb the sage grouse population at all. If anything, as somebody pointed out to me, it is all these telephone poles they have strung over northern Nevada, which provide a wonderful perch for crows, which have undergone a population explosion. And crows are smart and lazy birds. They're not like hawks, which can fly and spot something to eat. They're basically just nest raiders. They don't catch birds in flight and eat them. They're not raptors. But they sit there on these telephone poles and survey the landscape, watching for sage grouse nests, and then go in there and eat the eggs or the fledglings. And it's no wonder that the sage grouse is having a problem. It's not the elimination of the habitat. It's the elimination of their ability to reproduce properly thanks to this explosion of crows and perches from which they can easily spot and assault the sage grouse nests.
And, of course, the obvious solution is bury the power and phone lines so that you don't have to have poles where the crows will hang out.
That's right. There are very few trees in Nevada, and the sage grouse, the trees that you find in Nevada tend to be in the mountain ranges, in the rain shadows and that, or on the rainy sides, and the grouse, however, nest in the plains, where the valleys where there are no trees whatsoever. So the crows have never really had an opportunity until those poles were put there. And yes, burying the power lines and the telephone lines would be a solution, but that's a big capital cost that's going to be funded by the taxpayer, and so that's not going to happen.
We'll have more Discovery Watch with John Kaiser right after this.
I'm Bill McWilliam, president of Cascadero Copper, CCD on the TSX Venture Exchange. Cesium is one of the world's rarest metals with a growing industrial demand. Drilling is underway on our Tehran property in Argentina to prove up a cesium resource. Cascadero's patent-pending leach process has the potential to make Cascadero the lowest cost supplier of cesium in the world. Visit our website, cascadero.com, or phone us at 604-924-5504.
Cypress Development Corp's flagship lithium project is located just east of Albemarle's Silver Peak mine in the heart of Clayton Valley, Nevada. A 12-hole exploration drill program for lithium-enriched claystone on Cypress's 100% controlled properties is now underway. Cypress Development Corp trades on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol CYP, the Pink's CYDVF, and on Frankfurt's C1Z1. For more information, please visit our website, cypressdevelopmentcorp.com.
Welcome back. We're chatting with John Kaiser. Did any new Discovery Watch candidates come to your attention at the Reno show?
2 new Discovery Watch candidates have come to my attention, thanks in part to being able to sit there or sit down with the people, the representatives, have the story properly explained to me, have me get my head around it. The first one, ironically, is a prospect generator called Renaissance Gold. That was a former spec value hunter recommendation on my part, but a couple years ago when I did my 2016-17 bottom fish list, I downgraded it to a bottom. I downgraded it to a bottom fish, because the company, it really has been a Nevada 1.0 type of prospect generator, but it had a couple of these Carlin type deposits near the southern limit of the sort of a Carlin type of a range where you can find these deposits. But thanks to headaches they had with the Forest Service, they gave up and dropped those claims because they just couldn't justify spending the time and effort to try and get it permitted and then try to farm it out in the midst of the worst bear market to hit the juniors in decades. And so I kind of demoted them to the bottom fish list, and sort of just been watching it, not very interested in it. But that changed because in May of this year, another company that I had been watching, it was a private company, it was Bob Felder's Kinetic Gold Corp. He has been pursuing Nevada 2.0 type of projects. He's been bankrolled by John Tognetti, who's also a big shareholder of Renaissance Gold, and was also a critical investor after the 2008 crisis when OX, the original owner of the Long Canyon project, had to keep up with Frontier Gold and meet its cash calls. And Renaissance Gold got spun out from OX when it merged with Frontier Gold, and that eventually led to Frontier Gold being taken over by Newmont for the Long Canyon deposit, way overpaid at $2.3 billion at the time. But they have developed a 100,000 ounce per year heap leach operation, but they're continuing exploration, following this stuff deeper and all that. At the end of the day, it will pay off for Newmont to have done this. They just should have probably waited a little longer and done it more cheaply. In May, Renaissance issued 6.8 million shares to acquire this private company. It had been ready to kind of go IPO or go public through some other means. One of their projects, South Roberts, Bob has been using this type of enzyme leach method to see through gravel cover and come up with prospective areas. McEwen Mining had optioned it. They managed to drill six holes and came up with anomalous stuff, but no obvious barn burner result, and dropped the option, which kind of left poor Kinetic stranded. But now what's happened is, since Renaissance acquired Kinetic, Bob Felder several weeks ago became the new CEO. He is now the driving force. Ron Parrott is chairman. Richard Bedell has stepped into a vice president role and just continued to do all the exploration work, the science and all that sort of stuff. And the company has attracted several important partners for the More Nevada 2.0 style of projects acquired through the Kinetic acquisition. And it's interesting, both are Australian companies. One of them is S2 Resources, which is the spin-out itself from Sirius Resources, which had found the Nova nickel deposit, which was bought out for $1.8 billion in 2015 by Independence Group. And this is in the Fraser Range area of Western Australia. S2's largest shareholder is Mark Creasy, who also happens to be a shareholder in Novo Resources, which of course has no relationship to the Nova nickel project. Earlier this year, S2 optioned 3 of Kinetic's Carlin-type prospects, including the South Roberts. And one of these projects is going to be a Discovery Watch candidate next year. But the one that should be the Discovery Watch is the Jupiter project, which was optioned this year to Ramelis Resources, and this is an Australian producer. And incidentally, both of these companies are well funded. Both of them are operating these projects. So it's interesting to see the Australians coming to Nevada, while a lot of Canadians are going to Australia. In any case, the Jupiter project area has had a fair bit of exploration in the past. But what Bob Felder and his team did is, when they looked at it, they realized that there was a component here which was very similar to the Long Canyon system. It is a target rock that had never been tested by drilling. So they have developed this target as a sort of almost a Carlin-style system, and it's to the southeast of the Northumberland deposit, which is the most southwestern deposit, clearly acknowledged as Carlin-style. Before you start getting into the Walker Lane area and these other ones that are sort of in between Round Mountain and so on, which are not really Carlin-type deposits. So there is a 6-hole drill program underway on this new target, which they have generated 3,000 meters. And with a company like Renaissance, it's very boring watching the whole portfolio of projects. I asked the team, if you had to keep only one project, which one would you keep? And they say, well, these are like children. We love them all. And the problem is, while management sees the glass as half full for its portfolio, the market sees it as half empty. So the trick for these juniors is to take the project where there is going to be upcoming news, a drill program that could dramatically change the potential of the project, and put that on the spotlight, show the audience what's going on. And the company is doing that. They've got a great website. They've got a lot of information. So Jupiter is going to be the current Discovery Watch project for Renaissance Gold, and I'm sure over the next year there will be other ones that we replace Jupiter with, if Jupiter in fact turns out to be a disappointment. And that's the name of the game for exploration. Most projects do not turn out, but each one, if it is a properly developed target and gets tested, has a chance to deliver a discovery that launches an S-curve type market valuation.
John, did you have a second discovery at the Reno show?
The other company is Bravada Gold, and this is a company that I cannot recommend even as a bottom fish because it has an ugly balance sheet. There's about $1 million in accrued expenses and loans from the insiders. That makes it, well, it violates the basic rule. The company can't be technically insolvent, and because you never know what's going to happen in terms of the company's existence. But they have a project called Wind Mountain, which they acquired in 2006 from Agnico Eagle. Between them and a partner, Argonaut Gold, about $8 million US has been spent on the Wind Mountain deposit. It's in the very far northwestern part of Nevada. It's a very young deposit, only about 5 million years old. It has been mined, about 500,000 ounces taken out in the past. Right now, it is an optionality type play with sort of a resource of 700,000 ounces of 0.3 grams gold and ounces at about 8 grams per ton silver. So they did a PEA in 2012, a modest 16,000 ton per day heap leach operation, 7-year mine life, that was going to produce 300,000 ounces and 1.7 million ounces of silver from the much larger, calculated resource. But it doesn't really fly at the current metal prices. It is an optionality type play. If gold goes into the $1,600, $2,000 range, this could be worth developing. And of course, more ounces could be brought into the resource model. But the company has decided that we can't sit here and just wait for the price of gold to go up. So what Joe Gieses has done is he's looked at all the historical work, done all the geological modeling, and most of the drilling is fairly shallow. But this system, it's a north-south oriented system consisting of basically 3 or 4 zones which have been successively down-dropped post-mineralization in a northern direction. And the model here for the formation of this type of epithermal system is that there are these fault structures that were the conduit for the mineralization, which hits this so-called Truckee Formation, which is a pretty good sponge, so the fluids bleed out into it, and that's why you end up with a relatively low-grade disseminated system that can be open pit mined. But these structures show evidence of multiple pulses of mineralization and opening and closing, which is what you want to see for the formation of a decent deposit. And this thing has quite a large mineralized footprint and alteration halo. And so they have said, well, underneath the Truckee Formation is the Pyramid Volcanic Formation, which is a very bad host for gold. It's got pretty tight rocks, and it sits on top of the older basement metasediments, and the fault structures that were the conduits would have come through there, and there's probably some deeper intrusion that was the heat source. And there's a style of deposit called the Hirikishi, or let me get that, the Hishikari in Japan. It's a fabulous system. It's only 1 million years old. It's operated by Sumitomo. It's a similar type of setting. And what happens there is that as the fluids come up and you have this periodic squeezing of the fault structure, they tend to go along the lithological contact. And in this case, it would be between the Pyramid Formation and the older rocks. And that's where very high grades pile up. There's been 7 million ounces mined from this Japanese deposit, and there's another 6 million ounces left, and it's got fabulous grade of 45 to 50 grams per ton. So Bravada has just started a hole at the southern end where it's uplifted, and this contact zone is closest to the surface. It'll be a 450 meter hole that will be designed to cut through the this lithological contact and the subvertical fault, that's the fluid pathway, and then they will step 1,500 meters north into the wind pit area and drill a similar but 600-meter deep hole. These are conceptual holes designed to establish that the mineralization was able to bleed into the lithological contacts and create bonanza-type zones at the base, which could end up being developed as an underground mine. The company just raised $850,000. The insiders are just sitting on their accrued loans and salary stuff, waiting for a big win. The financing was done at 10 cents. Insiders ponied up. They had thought of trying to farm out the project to somebody else, but they said, let's just take the dilution, put up more money, give this a shot, see if we have a story for next year where we can raise money for delineation drilling of a high-grade Ishikari-style system.
John, thanks for the update.
You're welcome, Jim.
We've been talking with John Kaiser, his website, kaiserresearch.com. I'm Jim Goddard.
Comments made on Discovery Watch are an expression of opinion only and should not be construed in any manner whatsoever as recommendations to buy or sell any financial instrument at any time. Archived online at howstreet.com. Discovery Watch is a production of How Street Media Incorporated.